They say some memories cling like dew to leaves, silent, cold, and impossible to shake. Mine begins with a message that still echoes in my mind. Meet me alone in the jungle tonight. I never imagined I'd say yes. My name is Areeba. I was 24, still caught between dreams and responsibilities, when I met him, Faisal. We met at my cousin's wedding, the kind of loud, colorful gathering where everyone's watching everyone and laughter masks deeper intentions. Faisal wasn't like the others. While most guys cracked jokes or flaunted their cars, he spoke in metaphors and watched the sky like it held answers. He found me in the kitchen arranging sweets and said, "You look like someone who doesn't belong in crowds." I laughed. He was right. That night, we talked about everything: films, poetry, what scares us. By the end of the week, we were texting daily, slipping into a rhythm that felt like a secret melody no one else could hear. He wasn't pushy. He didn't flirt like boys do. He asked questions like, "What do you run from when you can't sleep?" I answered things I'd never told anyone. It felt safe. Until it didn't. 3 weeks after we met, he sent the message. Just one line. "Meet me alone in the jungle behind the Shabazz orchard. Tonight. No one must know." My first instinct was to say no. Who asks something like that? But his voice message followed quickly, soft and urgent. "There's something I want to share with you. A part of me I've never shown anyone. Just this once, Areeba. Trust me." And somehow I did. That night, I told my mother I was staying at my friend Sanaa's house for a group study. I slipped out in a loose shawl and quiet slippers. The streets were still, and the warm air buzzed with invisible tension. My heart pounded with every step toward the jungle. It wasn't completely wild, just a small patch of forest near the edge of our village. Figs and eucalyptus trees stood like ghosts in the moonlight. A single lantern glowed near the center. And there he was. Faisal stood with his back to me, a blanket spread on the ground, 2 cups of tea beside it. When he turned, his smile melted the fear in my chest. "You came," he said softly. "Of course I did," I replied, ignoring the shiver crawling up my spine. We sat, knees touching, tea growing cold. He didn't speak at first, just looked at the trees, then at me. "Areeba," he finally whispered, "if you knew the things I hide from the world, would you still want me?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know the truth then. All I knew was that I had just stepped into something much deeper and much darker than I had ever expected. The night deepened around us, cloaking the world in a silence that felt both intimate and eerie. The faint hum of insects, the rustle of distant branches, everything seemed heightened in that jungle stillness. Faisal sat across from me, his gaze distant yet unreadable. "I come here when the world gets too loud," he said quietly, fingers tracing circles into the soil. "It's the only place I can think without pretending." His words held weight, but his eyes, they held something else. Pain? Guilt? I couldn't tell. Still, I listened, drawn deeper into the gravity of his voice. "I don't trust people easily, Areeba. They smile when they need something, then disappear," he continued. "But you're different. You see the cracks and don't run." My heart softened. Maybe this jungle wasn't just a strange meeting place. Maybe it was his sanctuary, and tonight was his way of letting me in. I nodded, unsure of what to say. There was comfort in the way he looked at me, like I was a secret he wasn't afraid to share. We talked for hours. About the kind of childhood that leaves marks no one sees. About love and its many disguises. He asked me about my fears, and I told him about losing my father at 14, about the loneliness that clung to me like a second skin. He reached out, slowly, and wrapped the shawl tighter around my shoulders. "You deserve to be protected," he said. His touch was gentle, intentional, and yet a strange unease began to stir in me, quiet and unwelcome. I noticed how often he looked at his phone, how quickly he changed the topic when I asked about his family. Small things. Easy to ignore. But I felt them. Around 2 a.m., a sharp crack sounded from the trees. I startled. He didn't. "Probably just a fox," he said smoothly. "They roam around at night." Nothing to worry about. He smiled then, but it didn't reach his eyes. The warmth from earlier felt diluted, as if something had shifted between us. Still, I clung to the hope that I was imagining it, that I was just tired. "Do you believe," he asked suddenly, "that some nights can change everything?" I looked at him. The lantern flickered, casting soft shadows across his face. I whispered, "some nights reveal everything." We lay back on the blanket, shoulder to shoulder, watching the stars through a canopy of leaves. His breath slowed, but mine stayed alert. I didn't understand it then, but my heart was bracing for a truth it didn't yet know. As the night thickened and the moon shifted, I closed my eyes beside him, willing myself to trust, even as something inside me quietly began to retreat. The sky began to shift from black to gray, and the birds stirred restlessly in the branches overhead. I opened my eyes slowly, still wrapped in the shawl, still lying beside Faisal. For a fleeting moment, I thought it had all been a dream, the jungle, the confessions, the quiet closeness. But then I saw him, already awake, already distant. He stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, his back to me. Something about the stillness of his posture felt off. I sat up, brushing twigs from my hair. "You didn't sleep?" I asked gently. "No," he replied without turning. His voice was low, clipped, so different from the man who had whispered to me beneath the stars. I stood, waiting for him to look at me. He didn't. Instead, he picked up his phone, stared at the screen, then slid it into his pocket. "What's wrong?" I asked, a knot tightening in my chest. Faisal sighed, then turned around slowly. "You should go," he said. "It's almost dawn. Someone might see you here." I blinked. "What? That's it? After everything?" He looked at me, finally, but there was no softness left in his eyes. "Areeba, this wasn't meant to be more than one night." I felt the air leave my lungs. Before I could reply, a voice called out from the trees. A girl's voice, confident, casual. "Faisal." A figure stepped into the clearing. She was tall, wearing jeans and a long scarf, her expression calm and assured. Her eyes landed on me instantly, and a smirk tugged at her lips. She walked straight to him, wrapped her arm around his. "This her?" she asked. Faisal looked away. "I'm his fiancé," the girl said, directing her words at me like arrows. "We're getting engaged next week. But I'm sure he told you some version of that story, didn't he?" I couldn't speak. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt. "I told you to leave," Faisal murmured, barely meeting my gaze. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my ears. Every word he'd ever said to me now echoed with hollow cruelty. Every smile, every poetic line. It was rehearsed. A pattern. A trap. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of them. Without another word, I turned and began walking. Through the trees, through the rising dawn, through the suffocating truth. The jungle, which had once felt like a secret world of magic, now pressed in around me like a prison. Every leaf, every sound, every shadow felt like betrayal. By the time I reached the road, my face was numb, and my chest ached with the weight of knowing. He had never intended to love me. He had only intended to win. The days that followed felt like walking through fog, each step forward heavy, each breath tight with the sting of disbelief. I avoided my phone, silenced every notification, and ignored every knock on my door. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation. The kind that makes you question your own judgment, your worth, your ability to tell truth from illusion. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my best friend Sanaa. Instead, I turned inward. My journal, once filled with hopeful lines and half-written poems about Faisal, now held pages of bitter clarity. I wrote not to remember, but to release. The more I wrote, the more I began to see the red flags I had ignored, the vague answers, the evasive silences, the way he carefully crafted his vulnerability to earn mine. He hadn't just lied. He'd studied me, mirrored me, made me believe we were two broken pieces meant to fit. But we weren't. He was a mirror, not a match. Weeks passed. The jungle faded from memory, replaced by early mornings, cups of chai, and long walks with no destination. Slowly, I stopped asking why. Some questions aren't meant to be answered, only understood. One afternoon, fate brought him back into my sight. I saw him across the courtyard of a family wedding. He wasn't alone. His fiancée, now his wife, stood beside him, radiant in crimson and gold. He looked older, tired. For a moment, our eyes met. He looked away first, and that was enough. I didn't feel anger anymore. No bitterness, no rage. Just a strange, quiet relief that I was no longer a part of that lie. I turned away, not because I couldn't bear to see him, but because I had finally outgrown the version of myself who had once believed in him. They say some nights change everything. I believe that now. That night in the jungle wasn't a love story. It was a lesson. And though it broke something in me, it also lit something new. Awareness, strength, self-respect. Love isn't built in shadows. It doesn't hide behind secrecy or show up only when the world isn't watching. Real love doesn't need to be tested in silence or proven in the dark. And I've promised myself I will never again mistake mystery for depth or danger for romance. To anyone who hears my story, if someone ever asks you to meet them where no one can see, ask yourself why. And if your heart feels uneasy, even for a moment, trust it. That's your truth speaking.